Good morning again from Invergrove Heights. Oh, good morning again. Today we look at Exodus 16 through 18. And the Israelites have been set free. They've crossed the Red Sea and they're journeying, it says, from Elim. And all of the congregation came to the wilderness of Sin. And this wilderness of Sin has nothing to do with our English word for sin. It's between Elim and Sinai or whatever that way, but the exact location is not certain, but it doesn't have anything to do with what we would say as sin. It's an area that way. But they got there, it says, on the 15th day of the second month. So they've been journeying, for a month and a half roughly or whatever, and verse 2, the whole congregation complained against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. It might not have been 100%, but it means generally that, a big majority of them, a lot of people were complaining, and just say, oh, we had it so much better in Egypt, and oh, that we had died by the hand of the Lord in Egypt when we sat by pots of meat and when we ate bread to the full. You've brought us out in this wilderness to kill us with hunger, and just, we're tired of this, and it's the general complaining and grumbling, and we've got a few things that we generally complain and grumble about in our world too, and the weather is one of those. It doesn't matter what happens, but it's we complain and we grumble, and about prices of so many different things, but they were unhappy with where they were, and they were used to having working hard. Slavery was hard work and everything, but the Egyptians provided. They had bread, they had meat, they had food to eat, even though they were probably raising a lot of that and doing a lot of the work to raise it. But it was different because there was an ample supply of everything. So they complained to Moses and against God himself as well. So Moses says, I will rain bread from heaven, and people will gather so much, and he tells Moses that, have the people go out and gather an omer of wheat, which is a sixth of an ephah, which, still doesn't tell me really how much it is. It's quart, whatever. But, they were to gather so much wheat, or so much of this manna for each person in the household. And not to try to gather so that they would store it overnight, but of course some didn't listen and did, and then it would be moldy and wormy and stinky in the morning, and well, then that wasn't good, and God was displeased with that because he didn't trust me. And then on the sixth day they were to gather enough for 2 days, and it would keep overnight. And what an example of God's grace and of God's power, that if you gathered it, say, on Tuesday night and think you're going to keep it, or Tuesday morning rather, and you're going to have enough for Wednesday morning, it would be wormy, moldy, stinky. But if you gathered it on the evening before the Sabbath, or the morning before the Sabbath rather, it would store all of that day, and it would be fine on the Sabbath. Whereas, a day earlier, if you did it, it would be bad. But one of the ways of God showing his power over heavens and the earth and everything. And God says, in verse 11, the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, I have heard their complaints. At twilight you will eat meat, and in the morning you will be filled with bread. So quail came, it covered the land, in the evening, so that they could gather meat to eat. And in the morning the manna came, this white flaky bread that they didn't know what it was, but it said it tasted sweet like honey, and so it was, palatable. It was satisfying. And it tells us that, they lived 40 years on that manna. Verse 35, the children of Israel ate manna for 40 years until they came to an inhabited land. They ate manna until they came to the border of Canaan. So God led and provided for his people from all of that time. And I just it always makes me wonder, how many more times did they complain about, this manna? All we're eating is this, it's the same old thing every day. I mean, we don't like to eat the same old thing every day, day after day after day. But or maybe some people maybe do, but it's nice to have a variety. But for 40 years, God provided. That's what's important. And chapter 17, and we can read this story again in Numbers, and that's a part of the deal with the story of the Exodus, and part of Genesis. I mean, we reread some of that in the book of Numbers and other things as well. It's in the accounting of the histories. But they set out on their journey from the wilderness of sin, so they're moving again. They didn't travel every day, so they were in this wilderness of sin for a while, and they set out from there, and then they camped at Rephidim, but there was no water. So again, they complained to Moses, "There's no water," and I can understand that. I mean, we need water to drink, and we need good water to drink. You don't want to drink salty water. You don't want to drink brackish water. If the water's dirty, you don't want to drink it. So they complain, and God says, God cries out to Moses, "What shall I do with these people? They're ready to stone me." I mean, they were angry at Moses. And, I mean, it wasn't Moses, but, we have a scapegoat. And Moses was their scapegoat for so many things. But, the Lord says to Moses, "Go before the people. Take some of the elders. Take in your hand your rod, which you struck the river, when they crossed the Red Sea, and strike. There will be a rock in Horeb, and strike that rock, and water will come out so that people may drink." And another example of God's power, of God's oversight, of God's control of everything, of heaven and nature and earth, that Moses could strike this rock, and water would come pouring forth. I mean, there are people that, can use a Y branch to, go on, and they, it's called divination to, oh, there's water here, and I know people that do that. I know well drillers that do that, and others as well. And it's not just some idea, but it actually truly works. But anyway, Moses gets water out of this rock, and there's an expression or something that you can't squeeze water out of a rock. Well, there was more than just water squeezing out. There was enough for all of the people. And so they write this down, and then there's this, as the Israelites are camping there's this nation, this people of Amalek, came and fought, it says, with them at Rephidim. And Moses said to Joshua, and this Joshua is the one who's going to take over from Moses when they get to the promised land. Joshua will be the one that will lead. But Moses says to Joshua to select some men and go out and fight with Amalek. And tomorrow I will stand with you. And so this is where now when Moses is holding his staff up, the Israelites are winning the battle. And when Moses' arms get tired, the Israelites begin losing the battle. So Aaron and Hur support Moses' hands and arms so that the staff is held up, and they defeat this army of the Amalekites. And then verse 14, God says to Moses, "Write this as a memorial, because I will utterly blot out the remembrance of Amalek from under heaven." However, we have that written down, so the memory of Amalek isn't completely gone, but the Amalekites were never there to bother the Israelites again. Chapter 18, we come to Jethro's advice. Jethro is Moses' father-in-law, and we kind of, you kind of forget. I mean, here the Israelites have been captive in Egypt, and Moses had gotten married from someone from another area, so there were other people around. It wasn't just the Egyptians and Jethro and his people. It wasn't just the Amalekites. As they first were leaving the promised land, God led them away from the land of the Philistines because of battle. So there were other peoples around. But Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, comes to visit, and he sees Jethro sees Moses being inundated with people coming with all kinds of problems, any kind and every kind, big and major, big and small. And Jethro's advice to his son-in-law is to choose 70 elders and give them oversight over the people, that they may be judges, so that they can take care of these everyday common petty things, and they will bring the big things to you. You can still be judge over the big things. And so Moses chooses these people, and they work that way. And I'm thinking it's 70 people. Whatever. But Moses chose all of these people to be judges and to help him in his leadership. And it's the model for us today. In our government, a king, in a country is hard pressed to make all of the rules and all of the laws. So they have the parliament, they have others helpers, and and there are places where there are dictators. One person does everything, and those governments generally aren't for and of the people. But with having more than just one person helping make the decisions, it spreads the load of the leader and allows the leader to do what he can do best, is to lead and guide. And so Moses chooses these leaders at the wise advice of his father-in-law, and things go a little bit better for Moses, at least. We'll see you tomorrow morning on a Sunday morning. I won't look at the book of Exodus, but I'll have a devotion tomorrow morning as well.